Pull up a chair, horror fans. Step out of that bitter, biting Atlantic wind and cross the threshold right into my salt-crusted Victorian sanctuary. I'm Elias, the keeper of this lonely beacon. Today, we're not just looking at dry facts or data. I'm bringing you an explainer of my own tragic parable. It's a chilling campfire tale of my descent into madness. So listen closely.
What happens when your sanctuary becomes your predator? It's a genuinely terrifying thought, right? I mean, we all have places we consider perfectly safe. Our homes, our locked bedrooms, those carefully constructed daily routines we rely on. But what if those very walls actually started looking back at you? What if the place you built to keep the darkness out suddenly trapped it inside with you?
Okay, let's dive right into the architecture of this fear. It all rests on a specific psychological concept that you horror fans might already know, the uncanny, or in German, unheimlich. So what does this actually mean? Well, it's that intense psychological dread you experience when something intimately familiar is distorted just enough to become alien and predatory. We're not talking about a cheap jump scare here or some monster kicking down your door. No, it's that creeping dread that seeps in when something is just off. It's looking at a trusted human face or your beloved home and realizing a fundamental rule of reality has been broken. Let me show you exactly how this infected my world.
Act 1. The Clockwork Sanctuary. For years, I lived by this baseline of total normality, completely surrounded by the crashing sea. My world was defined by a strict rhythm that kept all the chaos at bay. You know, the comforting hiss of the oil lamp, the thick salt crust on my favorite tea tin, and above all, that rhythmic thrum-clack of the heavy rotating lens above me. It was pure order. It was sanity. A literal sanctuary of Victorian engineering that I trusted implicitly.
But then, the gale began to rise, and right above the howling wind, I heard this wail coming from the gallery outside. It sounded exactly, and I mean literally exactly, like my late wife. It perfectly captured the specific, tender cadence of her singing voice. But here's the terrifying part. The sound stretched into a high note that was sustained far, far beyond the capacity of any human breath. The comforting memory of my beloved wife was suddenly tainted by an impossible biology. No human lungs could hold that sound. The familiar had been twisted into something entirely alien.
Which brings us to Act 2, the distorted domestic double. The banshee had entered my lighthouse, but she didn't smash through the glass and she didn't appear as some monstrous hag dripping with seaweed. No way. The horror was actually far more intimate. She manifested as a series of wrong domesticities. My sanctuary of order was dissolving into a phantasmagoric nightmare, basically draping this ghastly shroud of the alien over everything I own.
And this brilliantly illustrates how the familiar was replaced by a predatory distortion. Imagine finding your dinner laid out perfectly, exactly as you like it, but the meat is arranged meticulously to mimic the jagged, deadly rocks at the bottom of the cliff outside. Or looking into your shaving mirror, and the face is yours, but the pupils are horizontal, like a goat's. Every single object I trusted, my pipe, my heavy leather logbook, even the sheets on my bed, they all looked right but felt inherently other. My home was no longer my own.
Even my life's work was completely corrupted. The mighty Fresnel lens, that artificial sun I tended to every single night, my proud shield against the wild Atlantic, was transfigured. It was no longer a warning beacon keeping sailors safe. It had literally become a dinner bell for the salt-heavy dead. It was a flare fired into the hungry abyss, an open invitation to a dark power that recognizes absolutely no human borders. The mechanical pulse of the rotation, that comforting thrum-clack I relied on so much, had actually synchronized with the predatory heartbeat of the tide. I realized with absolute terrifying clarity that the artificial sun of my lighthouse just didn't serve the living anymore. It was pulling the darkness in.
Act 3. A Monument of Bone. The walls felt like they were physically closing in on me. The light was wrong. The air was incredibly heavy with the smell of old brine and earth. Everything was shifting into this final, inescapable descent.
Let's move on and see how this builds, because I was forced to endure a 7-day siege of the mind, totally trapped inside a cylinder of stone, with my own fracturing sanity. I bore witness to a grim geometry of isolation. The right angles, the spiral stairs, they all began to twist and distort right around me. Until finally, the transformation was complete. The lighthouse was no longer a structure of brick and glass. It had physically and psychologically transfigured into a monument of bone, an anchor for lost souls, with me locked right in the dead center. She finally cornered me at the very top of those spiral stairs. But she didn't scream, she didn't attack, she just leaned in close, her skin looking like a drowned moon, and whispered a secret only I knew about the very night my wife died. And in that moment, the true horror really crystallized. You see, this spirit wasn't some stranger from the sea. It was a projection of my own deeply suppressed guilt, literally wearing the skin of my life.
So, the crucial point is that the ultimate horror, the absolute zenith of the uncanny, wasn't actually the presence of a ghost. It was the shattering revelation of the self. My own identity had been hijacked. I stood there, looking across the lantern room, and I saw myself. And that me watched as the life left my body. The familiar, my very own self, proved to be the most terrifying specter of all.
My tale is told. But before I leave you horror fans to the dark, I want you to ask yourself one final question. Have you ever felt your own home watching you? Tonight, look around your room. Look at your favorite chair. Look in the mirror. Are you absolutely certain nothing has changed? Because the uncanny is always waiting just beneath the surface of the familiar. Thanks for joining me for this explainer. Stay curious, and maybe keep the lights on.